Hi, I am so excited today to bring you a luminary expert in the field to try and give us insights about how we can support the most vulnerable students who are experiencing COVID and who are experiencing all the downstream effects. So without further ado, you all know who she is because you're all here to learn from her. Dr. Sara Goldrick Rab, I am so delighted that you made the time for us. I know that you are mainly spending most of your time talking one-on-one with students to try and find out how you can get resources to them. You're hearing the really hard things they're going through. And I just wanted to extend our platform for you to be able to share what you're hearing and how we can help, because colleges want to be useful, but I think you have your finger on the pulse in a way no one else does.
Hey, I appreciate it. Welcome to my living room.
Welcome to my living room. I'm not wearing shoes, I'll be honest.
I'm not either.
So, well, thank you so much for making the time. So, yeah, right now you are triaging and talking to students every day, trying to keep a million studies going because you are a distinguished scholar and researcher. And you are, we're already getting comments. This is great. And so right now, can you give folks a sense of kind of what you're seeing for real college students? And by real college students, we mean real college students who are struggling with the things that they are not the stereotype that people thought students were. So can you share a little bit more about that for people?
I mean, look, I first want to just say what we mean by real college here. I don't know how many of you are like me, are children of the 80s, but I always used to watch The Real World. And I thought at some point when I really started to see folks, up close and personal going through college these days, that it was really time to stop being polite and start getting real. And I coined this term, real college, about 5 years ago to say, look, these are just people going through real life. And I mean, this pandemic is a really good example that really illustrates how real things can get, right? When you've got kids on your lap and you're trying to take a class, or you're being told you should focus on school when your job is in jeopardy, or when your mom is sick, right? So that's kind of the real life. At this point, I have a couple of different vantage points with which to view the situation, and I want to be really transparent about that. I sit at the intersection of 3 different organizations, all of which deal with real college students and the institutions that are struggling to serve them. So the Hope Center for College Community and Justice is primarily hearing from and working with the colleges and universities that are reaching out for help, asking, for example, how do we think about getting students food at this moment when our dining hall is closed? Or what do we do if we have to close campus and we know that students are going to have to move out of residence halls? Are there better or worse ways of trying to message that? The other organizations that I'm working with, the first one is Believe in Students, which is a nonprofit that I founded in 2016 and I now serve on the board for. Believe in Students has partnered with RISE and Equity to operate the Student Relief Fund, which you can find at studentrelieffund.org. And we're doing 2 things there. One is we're fundraising, we're crowdfunding to get money that can go to students. And the money's being distributed through 2 of Believe in Students programs. The Fast Fund program, that's been around for a while now and has 26 sites around the country, and through Equity, which is currently operating in Dallas, but will soon be in other cities. So that is the second area. And we're also operating a portal where students are writing in not to get money through anything like Venmo, which is not something we're set up to do, but rather to get navigational assistance. And there's a team right now of about 15 volunteers, right now headed by Stacy Raphael here in Philadelphia. And those volunteers are trying to help connect students from colleges all over the country. So if you're watching from a college, we probably have heard from your students. And they're asking things like, well, how do I get help? How do I find unemployment? Or they're just saying, I need money. And we're telling them for the first time about resources that are on your campuses. And the last group that I'm working with is Equity, where I'm Chief Strategy Officer for Emergency Aid. And we're helping the institutions that are saying, you know what? We have an emergency aid fund, but let's be honest, we used to give out like 1 or 2 grants a week, and now we have hundreds, if not thousands, of applicants. Sorry, that's like my Amazon order arriving. Just ignore it. So with all of those applicants, the colleges are struggling. And so they're asking Equity for our tech assistants to be able to support those students. So we're getting a lot, as you can probably imagine, of different streams. And what I hear is stress. Number one thing, serious levels of stress, serious levels of anxiety, people very, very concerned about what their future looks like, even their future in 2 weeks. And third, of course, just an immense amount of financial stress. It's not like about one thing, it's about all the things at the same time.
This is super helpful. I'm just trying to make sure I take notes for folks.
Sure.
Stress, anxiety, and fear. And one of the things that I really appreciated you were elevating that for me, I wasn't even thinking about is, where, how are colleges making this information that students need as visible and available as possible. So you were the one who was arguing like you need to make sure that your emergency aid portal or that your link is very public and something that everyone knows where it is. And so what are some other things that if I'm at a college, if I'm hearing what you're saying right now and I want to be useful, I'm looking for things that I can do to make sure that I'm at least not part of the problem and I'm trying to at least move things in the right direction. What are those things that folks could be doing that are easing some of this?
Yeah, I mean, this is really the low-hanging fruit, right? Because this doesn't cost money. And I think that the number one thing that they need to do is have somebody who centers themselves in the mind of a student going through this. Mm-hmm. And the student going through this right now has the Wu-Tang song Cream on their minds, okay? Cream stands for cash rules everything around me. And right now it's cash and coronavirus rules everything around me. Now, it sounds like I'm just trying to have fun with this, but I'm not. What I'm trying to do is get you a clear scientific finding to integrate into your work. And that finding is that when scarcity, when the lack of money, the lack of time, the lack of comfort rules your day, that's all you can see. And that means that if you have to go trawling through a website or parse a big document where you have like 18 things listed before the student can find out there's an emergency fund, the student isn't going to find it. And so this isn't the first time that I've ever had to say, put your stuff really clearly on the front page or, in multiple pages so that people will stumble across it. But you've got to understand this is not the moment to have a program that students need and make it hard for them to find it. And I don't think schools are trying to play games. I do think they're afraid to advertise resources they're afraid will run out. And that's a fear that's confronting them right now. And I'm begging them to get over it and advertise the support. Students have been very grateful. They have said to me, it was cool that my school had a laptop scholarship program, mm-hmm. for example. The Los Angeles Community College District, their foundation, very quickly set up a laptop scholarship program. Students appreciated that it was there even when they went to it and found out that it was tapped out. Mm-hmm. It still meant something that LACCD had tried. And again, put it there so they can at least try.
And so was your sense, what I'm seeing is that campuses, first off, most of them didn't have, they had some loaner laptops, but those were just, it was like as many folks as we have to help with you transitioning our course online. There was just, enough to get by. And now all of a sudden, ASU spent $5 million last week on laptops and hotspots for students so that they could be able to engage. And there was no fund for that. That was just like, I don't know where they took that money from, but it was something else. So for campuses who are thinking through these other tactical, strategic things that students need, it's wireless internet because that is not equitably distributed. It's access to internet because they're shutting down libraries too. So you can laptops. Food insecure students are obviously, this is going to be a heightened sense, and they need to be able to take a lot more food with them to store for their entire quarantine. And I don't know what is your advice about that? Because some of them, we want them to keep their food pantries open, but they have a staffing problem of putting people around people at this moment. Okay, so let me break that into a couple of different things. First of all, yeah, I totally get it. They had to take money from other things. I honestly think it's amazing that ASU had $5 million to find and repurpose. And I just watched, as Compton College
just dug in deep, right, to try to come up with the 325 laptops that President Keith Curry was able to give out. And I think we do have to recognize, especially as we do fundraising and especially as we argue for government support, right, that the places where the students have the greatest need have the smallest endowments at this moment. And it's a really big challenge. It's a political challenge that we have to talk about. But the other thing is, I think we also need to recognize where it's our assumptions that are making us staff things that don't have to be staffed. So you don't have to staff a food pantry right now to keep it open. Just keep your food pantry open. I mean, just ask yourself, what's the worst thing that will happen? I'm not suggesting that you leave a pile of Amazon gift cards unattended on the street. I'm suggesting that you leave a closet or whatever your food pantry is, often small, unlocked, with a sign on the door that explains what it's for and asks students to do the right thing. They will. We have seen this time and time again. There are plenty of unlocked food pantries, and they've been there well before we got to this moment. Now, I'm not suggesting that you don't guard your emergency aid fund by the same token. I am suggesting, though, that you not spend hours and hours of your day vetting every last darn application when you're going to give out like $100. Okay? Your administrative costs are going to exceed the value of the thing you're distributing. That does not make sense. Implement a quick, automated process. If you don't know how, there are folks out there who can advise you. It's not worth taking your stressed out staff's time and pretending like they're going to figure out which of the 100 students, when they can afford to fund 10, actually deserve the help the most. It's not worth it. It is better to get the 10 out quickly and spend the staff's time helping the other 90 figure out what other resources might be available. It also, by the way, is worth sending an email to your students, I would say weekly right now, pushing them to file for unemployment insurance if they have lost a job. There is money being left on the table here, and it's stunning to me how few colleges are actually telling students to go get this government support. And the students who don't know about it are going to take your limited resources when they should have used government support first.
This is great. Yeah, we're hearing so funders who've reached out to us and Equity, which, by the way, we did get we got a shout out for Equity in here. We're hearing funders who want to help give emergency aid, and this is fantastic. But we're also getting so some, like ECMC, one of our shared funders, has been really generous and just like get the money in the hands of the students. Just like, we trust you, and that's generally how I recommend. Like, financial aid directors, they hear the nuanced stories that they're not going to, it's not a checkbox situation. They're going to hear terrible things that are happening for students who might not be Pell eligible. But you know what? Those students are in crisis. There are a variety of reasons why someone would have need. And you want to give folks who are going to hear the information to be able to have as much discretion as possible to be able to help as quickly as possible.
I do want to say, get the money out the door is certainly a good principle. Okay. I am watching how colleges are responding, though. And in some cases, let me just put it this way. This is actually a relatively hard thing to do well, especially if you're trying to achieve, equity, right? If you're trying to do this equitably, you're trying to do this efficiently, and you're trying to do this with high impact, it's not a simple thing. One of the things that I spent a lot of time doing this week was thinking, from my position at Equity, one of the things, and I know I'm saying equity and equity, but one of the things that's been really hard is, even though we're an emergency company, we can't just start up with a college tomorrow, right? So there's technology involved. And so necessarily it would be like 6 to 8 weeks before implementation. That doesn't mean a college can just not do anything for the next 6 to 8 weeks. So we actually are shortly going to roll out, we have a bridge solution that would help in the meantime, which is something a college can do in the meantime. And part of the reason I just want to flag that I took a lot of thought in that regard is because you'd be surprised at how many different points at which a human still ends up doing work if you don't design this really carefully. And what looks like a small amount of work. So for example, there's a college who will remain nameless, who decided to send out a lot of grocery gift cards to their students. Well, that's cool, but there's a couple of issues, right? One is, do you really have the right student addresses? Two is, it's one thing to send out 200 gift cards and you sit in an office and you address all those labels, right? And you put them in the mail. But it's a whole other thing if you need to do 1,000 of them, right? And so you got to think through those alternatives, right? And so I just want to flag that part of what we're learning in this pandemic is that we were caught a little off guard, right? And one of the things I really hope we all take from this is that we recognize that it is worth putting some time and some effort into getting some of these systems in place, because we know this isn't going to be the last time.
Totally.
And that scale matters. And I know that's something you care a lot about at UIA. I just want to emphasize, I think the percentage of our students who need this help is well over 50%.
I agree.
So we cannot tell ourselves this is a program for 100 people.
No. And so we actually, you don't even know this. Like, you were probably your ears tingling. I was actually sending folks to Equity because people are trying to get resources in the hands of our students, and we're trying to think through the fastest way, knowing all of our employees have now been shifted to remote. Their kids are home.
I know.
And now any new philanthropy, it's going to be a ton of process. And how do we get, yes, we want accountability, and yes, we want to make sure it's the right folks, but like adding more process while people are struggling to do their own jobs. And then they're hearing crisis calls for help from their students that's the whole reason people work in this space. That's really challenging. So I was just kind of like, we need to Venmo all these students. And
right. And you can't,
it's theoretically a Venmo for identifying the students who are in most urgent need.
It is. And I just want to urge, though, people, please don't start doing that.
Yeah, no.
There are implications. And I just want to flag, because, not everybody knows me as well as you do, Bridget. I mean, right. One of the reasons I created the nonprofit Believe in Students, and the main reason that I joined Equity, is because I have personal experience doing exactly that, right? That I kept seeing those problems. And I did Venmo them. And I could tell you, please don't do that. There are repercussions to doing that. And I can also tell you, I think some folks, who follow me on Twitter know it's been a really stressful week. And I do my best. But, I had a night the other night where I told everybody that my husband was like, you've got your finger in a dam. And it's going to keep pouring, honey, and you can't do it. And I hate being told that I can't help students. It's so hard. But the thing that was really getting me down, honestly, was watching the students and the Student Relief Fund just keep pouring in with so much need. And I struggle, and I know that so many of our awesome colleagues in student affairs struggle with this, with watching email after email after email of genuine need and distress. It's so demoralizing.
Yeah.
And so to anybody who has to do that job. So resident assistants do this all the time, right? They're the ones who see the front line. They're the ones who see the students, and they know how much it wears on them. To any administrator who has not actually been the front line, you got to protect your front line right now. And so anything you can do to try to take them out of actually doing that, I think it's the perfect time to say, you know what, somebody else, this is your job, right? That's where if tech can do it for a human and save a human,
you hear that?
They do have kids on their laps.
Chatbot vendors, anyone who makes a chatbot.
I was going to say chatbot, yes. So I've been talking a lot this week about chatbots. I have struggled with it because humans are really important, and I do worry chatbots don't fully replace them. But I do think there is a role for that. And I was just saying to somebody, that all this data that we have now from these students writing in, that helps you to know what the questions are. I know what the questions are. It's not hard, right? The questions are, oh my God, I lost my job. What do I do?
This is
basic.
Helpful stuff, because this is the point that, and in fact, Drew from AdMed Hub was supposed to come live with me tomorrow, because we're going to talk through. I want to hear all the questions that students are voicing, because I kind of went off on a rant this morning about pundits talking about the end of college right now, and how, like that's super helpful. Like, I really needed that on top of like triaging. We really need, the cheap seats to talk about how it's the end of days, when really what we need is, tell me the questions that students are asking that I haven't thought about, so I can look at my website and I can figure out whether or not we're giving them the information they need. Help me triage and help institutions who maybe they're this far along, because some campuses haven't come back from spring break. So what are the folks who came back last week? what did they learn in 1 week's time that you can share to those who are coming ahead, right? Like that's what we need right now. And so anyway,
I agree with you. No, this the doomsday talk, I've seen a lot of people tweeting and saying, please don't send me an email telling me you can help me and try to sell something. I totally get that. But this is also not the time to pretend like we're suddenly going to learn about the effects of online education, that we're suddenly going to, find out that faculty should have always been online, or that this is some sort of research experiment. Those op-eds, that chatter, it's not coming from a place of people in direct contact with what's happening here with either the faculty or the students.
Mm-hmm.
I think the larger risk here is that people are going to have a really bad experience being pushed online in a really haphazard way. And it could set back some folks because they had bad experiences. But this is also not a fair test of anything truly online related, because this isn't how anybody would roll out an onboarding to online education.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would say that, my aunt is a professor at MIT. And so I've been helping kind of troubleshoot with her how to transition her course online with Zoom. And the one thing I talked to her yesterday, and she said that because she's been not excited about this, let's say, and she said that it was really strange because it felt like it took the pedestal out from under her, and she felt like she was really down with her students, and she felt like it was making her a better teacher because she's like, there's no pomp and circumstance, there's no puffery here. I can see their faces right here, and if I'm not resonating with them, I have to adapt. And before, I could just kind of like go off on a thought and not look down and not see what I was missing. And like,
okay.
So I do think there's some good that's going to come out.
Yeah.
It's not a perfect experiment.
Oh yeah. No, I totally agree, Bridget. So actually, if those op-eds and the chatter were directed at the experiences of the top 1% of faculty who've worked in places like that, where they haven't needed to engage in that way before now, cool. It's just that let's recognize that the rest of us faculty, this isn't our first Zoom, by the way. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it worries me that higher ed is getting painted like we all are just discovering Zoom for the first time. We're not. But what we should be talking about, because I see somebody's asking that, like we should be talking about, for example, the huge consequences of the serious lack of professional development that faculty and staff get on a regular basis, and how this moment is highlighting that we were never given time and space to really learn how to do the things that you're asking us to do now. It's also important to note that a lot of professional development people do get has just been canceled because conferences have been canceled. Mm-hmm. And that could be the only chance that they had the entire year. I also think, and this is actually the first time in a long time that I've been shopping an op-ed around that I can't seem to place. It's not sufficiently COVID related, I'm told. All right, well, I guess I'm not that kind of doctor, but what I want us to talk about are the incredible ways in which wealth inequality has created this situation, and that we need to directly address that. We need to directly address the fact that a lot of us spent a bunch of time talking about Harvard closing its residence halls, and hardly anybody has spent time talking about what's happening at Bunker Hill Community College, the largest community college in Boston, where 2/3 of students were already housing insecure, and they're going to have huge problems making their rent payments. This isn't going to, in the long term, be a story about people who had to leave their residence halls. It's going to be a story about what happened when the eviction rules did change and they could start evicting again, and people haven't been making payments. And schools don't know the first thing, most of them, about helping students to establish fixed, stable, and affordable housing, right?
I do want to ask you, though, about that, because someone asked earlier, what are the innovative solutions that you're seeing and where are their answers? And, you mentioned that someone was trying to do Venmo or they were trying to do gift cards and that just didn't work. I did love seeing some community colleges that were taking a hotspot bus around to make it
totally.
That's innovative. And you know what? It's a bus, folks. Sometimes innovation doesn't need to be a robot. It can be something.
Oh, totally. Look how scaled that was, right? So by the way, I think that was Ann Kress at Northern Virginia Community
Mhm.
College. And I mean, look, right? Like you can have one person drive one bus and get Wi-Fi to a lot of people. Right? That's a decent thing. By the way, I wasn't saying gift cards wouldn't work. I think what I'm mainly concerned about is that they were mailed. I think they should be gift cards, right? They're going to go
Mhm.
faster and you're going to save money. So this is kind of my point. But I think that there's a lot of innovation that has been going on for a while. I think, unfortunately, not everybody's been connected to it. So, just to put in a plug, we are planning on having our Real College Conference this fall.
Yeah.
And if you have suddenly said, oh, I do want to know all the latest and greatest in the innovations in housing, I really hope you'll come, because there are a lot of things, and we put out a lot of information in our guides at the Hope Center, but there is no substitute for being in the room with the people who've been doing the innovative partnerships with public housing, for example, who've been doing the more innovative pieces around student shelters, which are not the solution, but they are a decent Band-Aid.
Mhm.
This is going to be October 10th and 11th. At Rutgers Camden. It'll start that Friday evening, the 9th, with a showing of Hungry to Learn, Soledad O'Brien's film. And it's our 5th conference, and I'm determined. I've got a great events team with Swaim Strategies. If we have to move online, we will. And we won't cancel. And I'll tell you, it's because we really think this is the professional development that higher ed needs more than anything. We're going to tackle food and housing, transportation, childcare, and mental health. And all of those things go together right at this moment in this crisis.
Totally. And then 2 weeks later, hopefully, if it's still
Hopefully.
the UI
Yep.
summit will be in Phoenix, Arizona. Yeah, I was on the phone with them yesterday. We're trying to think it through. And by the way, so we're happy to partner with you on taking that stuff online. We're going to start kind of shifting to more of a more regular dosage, because right now it seems like everything got canceled. Everyone went home. It was a ton of like anxiety and work and all this stuff. And then now I think there's going to be a lull where people are actually in the groove of things. And what we need to do is make sure that we're pouring into the community and giving ourselves the chance to be able to be continuing to triage and address, because there's a lot. I will say, just broadly to the concept of innovation, there's going to be more innovation happening during this crisis than people can anticipate.
Totally.
We just scaled a concept. We didn't need to get, there's no buy-in, like rapid transformation. People are going to figure out how to modularize their classes in a way they hadn't thought. We're going to figure out that really the role of higher education in solving some of these broader issues. I hope that we position faculty as the experts they are to be helping with these public health, public policy challenges. And I'm also seeing tremendous generosity. Like ASU created all these digital assets that they basically put out and said, yo, if you want to use these, they're here. We have a digital lab. We have a digital high school. All of these things and all these courses, by the way, that we've spent millions of dollars on. And I cannot believe people are not like reaching out. I'm like, if you're struggling with something, they literally have an asset catalog at ASU for me that you just get to use it. And I'm seeing stuff like that happen, and it's giving me hope. And so that's your jam.
Hope is definitely my jam. Definitely. I mean, look, I think I agree with you that we're going to see a lot more coming. I will tell you where I think that colleges need to lean in hard over the next month or two is that the legislation that is coming out of Congress right now has some really substantial benefits for students. We can talk about what it doesn't have. We can lament all kinds of things. But there is a responsibility at this moment to connect students to all those benefits that are coming out. One of the things my team is doing right now is a deep policy analysis of the legislation and its implications from everything from SNAP to emergency assistance, so that we can put out shortly some very detailed and clear guidance to colleges and universities, which we'll do through written form and a webinar, so that you know what it is you should lean into telling your students. This is, to your point, this is going to be a little new for some colleges that traditionally have not, they've talked about the Pell Grant, but they haven't talked about SNAP. They haven't talked about UI. This is the time. You have every economic imperative to do it.
Yeah.
You don't have enough dollars. You're going to lose your students, right? This is the time. The other thing is, this isn't about shifting what higher ed's role is. Education has always been part of what we call the social determinants of health. We're not going to solve a health crisis here with education. However, we can do a good job of contributing to remediating the current crisis and preventing a new one. And education has always played that role. Higher ed has always played it, whether or not we acknowledged and embraced it. The Hope Center is actually about to make a big transition from the College of Education at Temple into the School of Medicine. Oh, wow. And one of the really cool parts of that is that it's an acknowledgement of how our work is so tightly connected up to health. It's something that was in the works long before the pandemic, but I think you can see from our work during the pandemic, this is the truth. This is what this work is about. And let's be really honest. If we want to talk ROI and we're talking about the economy, but we're not talking about return for health, you're missing the boat.
Totally.
So, that will translate even at our conference down to support with your fundraising activities for colleges. Using the health lens actually brings you some additional funding opportunities as well.
Great. Okay. And then I want to respect your time because I bet you have a bunch of hard things to listen to and folks to help triage. One quick question we just had was about rural students. How have you seen anything? I work with rural students. Have you seen anything very effective for students returning to broadband deserts?
I know I've said it before a million times. This is the worst part, is that we don't have good thoughts there. We don't have stuff. What I really respected, and I said it very early when it came out, was I really respected Berea College's move to say that putting stuff online was not an equitable practice. And so they ended instruction for the term. And I think, I guess we can talk about the information students didn't get as a result. Okay. But you know what else? They didn't have to go home and take their limited time and bandwidth to focus on trying to get connected when the fact is a lot of them are in rural areas and they do not have access. Mm-hmm. So I do think we can play an advocacy role in pushing the organizations, companies that could create that broadband access to do so, and explaining the economic and the educational and the health imperative of that. I think others have done that, though, and we're still in this situation. So I just think we cannot talk the walk of equity and inclusion and all of that and pretend like proceeding without the 4 students in that class who are in those rural areas with, who don't have broadband access. Excluding them is not equitable.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I agree. Well, this is super helpful. I hope this is the first of many that I can just continue to give you a platform to help us, drive our attention towards the things that students really need us to focus on right now. And hopefully you can be surfacing more insights. So once your team has analyzed the legislation and you perhaps might have some of that, perhaps depending on your schedule, girl, I'm here. So
you're tremendous, Bridget. You were one of the first people that reached out, when South by was canceled, and said, let's get our content online. I can't say enough about, you live that innovative thing, man. I think it's great.
Well, we're really grateful. The Carnegie Corporation actually gave us some resources a few years ago to help us try and figure out how to innovate diffusion. And so we've been doing online Facebook Live. I think people were kind of like, what are you doing, for a while? But we were just, the idea that you physically have to go to a conference to get ideas made no sense.
I know.
We have to be able to figure out how ideas have to move fast enough to keep up with the needs of students. And, it's not perfect and we're going to keep trying to iterate, but it's mainly that we're acknowledging we're not the experts. Y'all are. And we just want to amplify the folks who are doing the good work and the insights to help as many folks as we can. So
I love the shout out to Carnegie, by the way. I've got one of those fellowships right now. They want me to write a book. Who has time to write a book right now? But huge shout out to them. We have similar funds from ConAgra and Aramark and others through our partners that believe in students. And I really appreciate that they think outreach is actually important.
Yes.
So
awesome. So funders,
awesome. Anytime, Bridget.
Funders who are giving unrestricted resources and who are freeing folks up from reporting right now. I just want to give a holler. Anyway, so thank you so much for everything you do, and hopefully we will get a chance
to
learn from you again.
Right, thank you.